Welcome to Meadowlarkers 69. Kate Fagan is not here. Amin Elhassan is here. I'm Howard Bryant. And we're going to talk baseball. I mean, it's baseball season. There's snow outside here, which means it must be warm down in Florida and Arizona. It's that time of year again. But this baseball is not the baseball that we know. We've got new rules. They've been talking about them for months. We've got bigger bases that are supposed to increase the action. We're supposed to get more stolen bases. Alex Cora, the manager of the Boston Red Sox, said that the new bases look like pizza boxes. We've got we've got a pitch clock, which means you got to get your butt in the batter's box, or they're going to call a strike on you, or a ball on you, or even end the game, as they did in one spring training game with the Boston Red Sox and the Atlanta Braves, where the batter did not get in the box fast enough, and he was called out, and there's your ball game. So one of the things, that I wanted to talk about, and before we get into this, I will say that we have also invited a surprise guest who may make it, may not make it, who can speak to these issues very well as well. But as it's just the two of us right now, one of the things that I was thinking, number one, was, oh, and by the way, third rule, no shifts. So the big thing is, so we're not going to see that slow pitch softball short fielder out there anymore, taking away hits from the big, strong left-handed hitter. So the old argument is gone now. So the old school, why don't you just hit it where the guy's not? Just bunt it down the third baseline. There's nobody there. That's gone. Nor is the big lefty slugger complaining that base hits have been taken away from him. It reminds me of when baseball went to the challenge system, and I went to Ron Washington, who was then the manager of the Texas Rangers, and he was like, "I'm going to miss this. Where's the old Billy Martin and the old Lou Piniella? We can't go argue anymore. What is this, football? I got to throw a handkerchief out on the first baseline." I'm going to miss these arguments. And so the old schoolers are going to have to find something else to complain about. First question for you is, what about this? What about these new rules? What are your immediate thoughts? I want to jump into this in a larger discussion, obviously, because I cannot think of another sport that has gone so radical in so short a time in the post-war, in the modern era, where the sport has gone sort of upside down. But let's just talk about these new rules first.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the most interesting thing to me is the fact that in baseball, the rules changes to the game are collectively bargained upon, right? In football and basketball, there's a competition committee, and in essence, the league and its individual franchise, they come up with the rules. The rules of the game are the rules of the game. The only thing that's collectively bargained is how we split this money and who's eligible and things like that. But in terms of, is this a foul? Is this not a foul? Is this, how many timeouts you get? All those things in football and in basketball, it's a unilateral decision, and the players just have to abide by whatever the rules of the game are. In baseball, they actually had to sit down, and this was part of the CBA negotiation, part of the lockout, was agreeing on this. So I find that immensely fascinating, and I hope our mystery guest comes on so I can ask why. How did that come to be, where the Players Association have the power to negotiate even the rules of the game? But when you get to the specifics, the pitch clock, it's funny. It's one of those things they've been talking about for a long time, for a very long time. The idea that we need to speed up the game, and the number one avenue for that is a pitch clock to eliminate all the kind of little ticks and stuff that the pitchers doing on the mound, the batters kind of taking time out and restrapping up their shin guard and, adjusting their cup and the elbow pad and staring out there and holding the bat up. And, the reality is, despite you calling it a very drastic change, it's necessary. It's a necessary change for a game that was getting
calling
longer.
It drastic? What do you mean?
Well, you kind of
This
said, "Oh,
is
this is the
drastic.
what's up?
This is look.
Well,
All
it's
right.
drastic because the game refused to change for so long. That's the reason why you have to have."
That's right. But here's the reason why when I say drastic, yes, you're right. This is baseball. And baseball is number one. All right, here we go. I'm 175 years old and I'm going to sound like it. All right, here we go. Baseball is the game that doesn't have a clock. Now it's got a clock. Now it's got
Right.
two clocks. It's got the clock in between innings to get these guys on the mound and to get the action started. And now it actually has a pitch clock inside of the game, right? That's the first thing. Baseball is the game that is supposed to be timeless. It's supposed to be the game that you can take the players from 1925 and put them in 2025, and the rules are essentially the same. Not the case anymore. Baseball is the game where it is supposed to, in many, many ways, police itself and is not supposed to be like basketball or like football, where you cannot compare errors in those sports because the rules are so demonstrably different and the game itself is so demonstrably different. You cannot compare the 19 30 Green Bay Packers to the 1979 Pittsburgh Steelers, but you can compare the 1927 Yankees to the 1975 Cincinnati Reds, at least in theory, because the rules are essentially the game hasn't moved very much, at least. It's obviously if you add, integration and all those other things to it, these things change things. But when I'm talking about radical, I'm also talking about something else. Let's go to where we've been. You've got these three rule changes, okay? In addition to that, you also added a minor change several years ago, which is now the automatic intentional walk. Remember, they actually used to throw them 4 times on the outside. That's gone. Now you've got an invisible runner on second base that showed up, in 2020 during the pandemic. So suddenly extra inning games now have a free runner on second base. Where did that come from? So you really are looking at a sport, you've also added a couple of playoff teams now as well.
Yes.
So suddenly over a 5-year period, the game is looking differently than it did before. It's the accumulation of the rules. And you're 100% right that this is, the reason why we're talking about it being so radical in baseball is because, one, everything in baseball is a fight. You do have to negotiate these. And to answer the question, the reason why it's collectively bargained is because this is what happens when you actually have a strong union. This is what happens when you get Marvin Miller and those guys in 1966, when they came in, you had Robin Roberts, you had Joe Torre, and they bring in Marvin Miller, and they said, we want to say on everything. And this has been the battle for the last half century. And, the rules are certainly part of it. Now, baseball can impose the rules if they feel like the CBA is either breaking down or they feel like the union is being, is dithering, which they were going to impose a couple of rules and then they didn't. So baseball still has the power to do that. But what we're seeing here in the sport is a radical shift in terms of management over the last 5 years, because management is convinced that this game is finished. Management is convinced that the left-right swipers and the attention deficit disorder people in this country are abandoning baseball regardless of what the numbers say, and they have decided, look, this is a priority. I mean, they've been talking about this stuff for years, but now it's all coming, and it's coming in year by year succession.
See, this is the part where I really enjoy, people blaming it basically on the follies of youth, right? These young people nowadays, they can't pay attention. But we look at it, I've got it in front of me. The average time of game per 9 innings last season was 3 hours and 3 minutes. I was slightly down from the year before, 3 hours and 10 minutes.
And that's right.
You go back 20 years ago to 2023, the average time was
20
2
years
hours.
ago was 2003.
2003, excuse me. The average time per 9 innings was 2 hours and 46 minutes. You go back 20 years before that, 1983, it was 2 hours and 36 minutes. You go back before that, it was all the way back to it was at 1947, the year of integration. It's 2 hours and 9 minutes.
Yep.
So we are steadily trending to a longer and longer and longer game. That's not a case of people with short attention span, although I'm sure that doesn't help. That's a case of a game, a sport that for whatever reason, whether it's TV timeouts or just more idiosyncrasies from the players, is a longer and longer endeavor. And
bloated. It's a bloated sport.
Mm-hmm. So at some point, there has to be some sort of mechanism. I know you guys hate clocks. That's why you play baseball, right? Because you want to while away a summer afternoon. But
you're not supposed to be on the clock when you go to a baseball game. Now, the Players Association argument was, look, people are coming to the game. People are still paying to come to the game. People are still watching the game. So the problem isn't the game. The problem is manufactured. That if people are coming to the sport, nobody is complaining that the game, once you buy your ticket, you're not saying, oh, I wish this game would continue on. I actually disagree with that argument. I thought that argument is ridiculous because as someone who covers the game, I'm sitting in the press box. I remember when, you sit in the press box, it's the fourth inning, it's 9 o'clock. And it's just going and going.
How, as someone who goes to baseball games purely as a recreational activity, I've never been credentialed at a baseball game. I only go because I'm going to have a good time. I know that 90% of the time I go to baseball games, I either don't show up on time or I leave well before the end of the game. I mean, I'm talking about 7th inning stretch.
You just leave baseball games?
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Let's just pull back for a quick second here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like dramatizations in documentaries.
I don't.
And you leave well before the outcome of a game is finished.
It's funny. It started, I used to think it was just me, like, oh, let's go do something else, or, let's beat traffic or whatever. But then I started taking my kids to games, and I would
just
even
get
say
out of here.
We have to stay to the end. They've never said that at a basketball game. They've never said that I've taken my kids to a soccer game before. The only sport they've ever said, can we go now, was baseball. And it wasn't, a whiny kind of, can we go now or whatever. It was just kind of like looking around and saying,
we've been here for 16 hours and the game has run its course.
Nothing is happening. Yeah, the game we went to a baseball game. We said we saw it. We said we saw these people hit a ball and run and catch it or whatever. All right, let's go. And I was like, you know what? I can't argue. I'm not going to argue that. And so it always kills me when people say, well, there's no problem because the ticket sales and the ratings or whatever. But there's an inalienable truth that was it 25 years ago, people said newspapers are fine. This internet, who cares? People are still buying papers, right? 10 years ago, people said television was fine. Ratings are still great. And what's happening is there's a very real and present danger that's impending, that the powers that be, because of whatever financial incentive they have, say, no, it's fine. We're making money.
It's clearly not fine.
And it's clearly not fine.
No, that's right. And I'll go one step further with that. When you watch the sport and when you write about the sport, I can tell you one of the arguments that the Players Association has made and that baseball people have been making forever is that people have been making this argument forever, regardless of the time of game. Baseball is too long. If you go back when I was working on my Hank Aaron biography, so I'm sitting there going through the day-by-days in the 1950s, and there's a sporting news in 1956. Are baseball games still? The game was like an hour and 57. And the same argument was being made. People were making that same argument in the early 1900s. If you go back and read the newspapers in 1907, there's going to be an editorial somewhere about why does this game take so long? It's taken 57 minutes, right? Because the nature of the sport is inaction until there's action.
Let me ask you, Howard, why do you think games are taking longer?
Oh,
Going all the way back to, the 1920s or whatever. Why? What is making these games longer and longer and longer?
Yeah, look, I think that three things. Number one, it is the advertising. You're adding more and more stoppages into the sport. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Playoff games take forever. Why? Because they keep stuffing commercial breaks into them. Right. And you can see it when they're doing the voiceovers for the rest of the ads. Guys are just standing around in the outfield.
Yeah.
They're just waiting. It's like when you go to a football game. I remember the first football game I actually covered instead of going as a fan. Because you've got the TV up there in the press box next to you. You're realizing that the players are waiting around for the commercial. And then the referee says, okay, let's go. Commercial's over. Let's play. And so baseball, you've got some of that. But the biggest reason too, on top of it, in addition, is sloth. When you have no clock, what do we always say, right? Work expands the time allotted. If you have 6 hours to do 20 minutes worth of work, it's going to take 6 hours, right? If you have 2 weeks worth of work and you have 6 months to do it, it'll take 6 months to do it. Eventually, you just begin to procrastinate. So Sandy Alderson, back when he was working in the commissioner's office, now the GM or the president of the Mets, Sandy used to say, one of the biggest problems we've got in this game is walk-up music. Guys are taking their time, listening to their favorite song, and you're adding 20 seconds, 25 seconds to every single at-bat because guys are listening to their tunes. If we got rid of walk-up music, we could shut the game, we could shorten the game by 10 minutes, right? Then, of course, there were the idiosyncrasies. You had guys, and it's been going on for forever. You go back to the Texas Rangers, Mike Hargrove, what was his nickname? The human rain delay. He just took his ass forever to get into the box. Now, you face Bob Gibson. Bob Gibson throws the first ball at your ribs for taking too long to get into the box. When you start getting rid of those policing mechanisms, guys are just a little bit more comfortable now.
Right.
Then you've got the Nomar Garciaparras of the world, and they're readjusting their straps and, oh, goodness, look, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a mystery guest. It is a mystery guest. It is Joe Posnanski, who said he was doing things and he'll be home in a few minutes. And he's here.
And I'm here.
And you're here.
I made it. Yes.
And you are exactly the person we want to talk to. We were just talking. Joe has a new, he's on the cover, as I just got his email about a half an hour ago that said there are 2 names on the cover of Esquire this month. And one is Chris Pine and the other is him. And it's there. Nice. 5,000 words, you say, on the new rules in baseball?
5,000 words. It's going to be difficult for people to separate my story and the Chris Pine story because obviously
Well, you're the same.
We're the same. Very similar people in all ways. Yes, 5,000 words on, I think, everything about the changes. Everything. Yeah, beginning to end, and also some of the proposed changes going on. So
we're loving this, right? So we were just talking about, Amin was asking about the sort of history of the why is this game and taking so damn long. And I was telling him about whether no matter what years you go back into, if you go back and look at the sporting news from 1920, or if you go read the Boston Globe from 1895, there is a story somewhere in those archives saying, why is baseball taking so long? It's a 57-minute game. Why does it take so long? And the argument was, work expands the time allotted. If you've got 20 minutes to do an hour worth of work, it's going to take an hour. So I was telling him about Sandy Alderson back in the day in the 90s when he was telling us how the biggest problem was walk-up music. Guys are just taking their sweet time with their walk-up music. And then you've got your Mike Hargroves, the human rain delay. And you've got Carlton Fisk used to take forever to get into the box. And, obviously the game polices itself very differently now. Nobody is throwing at you for taking your sweet time to get in there like they used to. And then the other thing, too, is that the pitchers take more time now. I remember, when I was covering the A's, Mike Moore was the guy, his games took forever.
Yeah.
When he was on the mound, you knew you had to bring fortifications. You weren't going to be, he wasn't Greg Maddux. There was not going to be one, 78 pitch, 65-minute complete game out there. And so Sandy and the rest of them recognized that, look, this is a problem. Okay, people are buying tickets. And I mean, to your point, this is the one time where baseball, where you do see sports go, okay, the money isn't answering the question here. Because during the steroid era and a lot of different other problems, the response was, yeah, but the money's rolling in. We don't have a problem.
Right.
With this one, they said the money is rolling in and we still have a problem.
Yeah, I think all that's right. I mean, that's sort of why I'm very excited about these changes and seeing what they're going to do for the game because, yeah, I mean, it's been the long history of baseball to just go, players will figure it out. They'll all work it out. It'll be fine.
And the fans will come to a picnic.
Fans will put up with anything. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's been the ongoing thought process for years and years and years. So to see them not only step forward, but step forward with something that is pretty dramatic and obviously will alter the way the game looks, especially in the early going. Kudos to them for finally doing that. I mean, we've been waiting, I think, for baseball to do, and to your point about PEDs and steroids, same thing. I mean, the big issue was not that players started taking PEDs, of course. The big issue is how that was handled and how it took forever for them to figure out a way to. I mean, everybody else had been testing for years, and baseball's like, we're too good for that. We're and the players refused to be a part of it, and so on and so on and so on. So this is what I really like about these changes is that baseball is being proactive. Baseball is beginning to understand, hey, we've got to compete. It's not a matter of baseball struggling, but we've got to compete over the next 20, 30, 50 years, and the game is going in the wrong direction.
Well, and let's put it this way, right? Right before Joe came on, Amin had told us sort of how he felt about this, but I never got a chance to tell you how I felt about it. I turned on the Cardinals and the Mets the other day, and it looked like speed dating. It was awful. It was like, I mean, it was fast. It was definitely fast. And, okay, ground ball to second, throw to first. Okay, here comes the clock, right? And I am not a rules person. I do not like outside interference. I don't like the serve clock in tennis. I feel like it's harassment. I don't
like that. Hold on. You like when they're standing there and they're bouncing that tennis ball 800 times and they look up and they go back to bouncing it a couple more times. That brings you joy?
Serve clocks are harassment.
Man.
Now, but on the other hand, the Rafa Nadal matches were taken forever because he took forever.
Right.
And then once again, another game with no clock. There is something here. My two favorite sports are the two games with no clocks, right? Okay. And because I don't like the fact that guys are feeling rushed, but they were abusing it. The lack of no clock was being abused. And you could tell it was being abused, especially when the returner is sitting there going, could you serve the fucking ball? Like they're just waiting. Could you serve the ball? And so the same thing is happening in baseball. However, it was extremely jarring. It was extremely jarring watching them move so fast. I was like, okay, are we watching the sport? Do we want this game to end really, really quickly, or do we want action? So that was the first thing that hit me. The second thing that hit me, I didn't really see a big deal with the bases yet. My feeling on the bases, Joe, and I want your opinion on this, I feel like if you really want to get rid of, if you want to increase action in baseball, I think that you've got to do two things. One, I think that the players are very savvy. I remember AJ Hinch told me a story about him giving Carlos Correa a green light once, and Correa didn't even take it. He goes, hey, man, we're up 10-2 or whatever. Take the base if you want. And he goes, no. He didn't want to take it because Carlos told him that his WAR was being affected more adversely by a caught stealing than by a successful stolen base. Right. So he's like, yeah, I'm not messing with my numbers with that. But I also feel like when we've got super slow-mo and you've got all this technology, I think you got to change the rule in baseball on the stolen base on the spirit. If you beat the ball, if you're on the bag, then doing a replay that you popped up 1/100th of a millimeter in super slow-mo and you're called out, I think that's got to go.
Yeah.
Because that's the real reason why you're not stealing bases, because physically the replay is going to show everybody pops off of the base for a millisecond when they, or millimeter when they're there. I didn't see anything really shift-wise that bothered me in that game. I think the shift thing is actually good. Do I like the fact that there's illegal defense in baseball? No, I don't. I think it's really, really unnecessary. However, I do think that what has happened, and the reason why they've had to do this, is because the analytics and the technology and the statistics are ahead of the game. And if that is true, if the data is so far ahead of the game, which is telling us, that we can calibrate, to a very, very high percentage where the ball is going, you are going to kill the action.
Sure.
So I get that point as well.
Yeah. Look, I see all of those points. I don't agree with any of them, but I see all of them. As far as the speed of the game, I think there are a couple of things to consider here. One is it's brand new and nobody knows what's going on yet. And you got pitchers throwing with 12 seconds left on the clock. You've got, batters who are, afraid to even get out of the box because they're worried about not getting back in time. All of that's going to work itself out. The inner clock that players have will begin.
Yeah, they'll adjust.
Yeah, they'll calibrate to the clock. And by the time, a couple of months in, certainly by the All-Star break, I mean, people talk about the playoffs. By then, everybody's going to know exactly what's going on. And it's not going to be, you'll see very, very few violations and it'll feel right. But the other thing about it is, I think over the last 20, 25 years, we've become conditioned to a completely different kind of baseball because
that's right.
The games that we're seeing now, if you put that game in 1983, it doesn't look anything different than the way they played
you
in
watched?
83.
Let me ask you a geek question, Joe, because I will admit in the affirmative that I do this.
Yeah.
How often do you go back and watch old games?
All the time. Time.
Same here. And it is a totally different sport.
They just move. The pitcher
move.
gets the ball, he pitches.
Get the ball, and get on with it.
Honestly, that's what was so funny. You mentioned Mike Hargrove, and I'm glad you did. So Mike Hargrove, human rain delay would take forever, with all these adjustments between pitches. He wouldn't stand out today. Everybody would. Yeah. Everybody does what he did.
We are all Hargroves.
We're all Hargroves. The reason he got the nickname is because nobody else did that stuff back then.
That's right.
So I think I love it. I think the pace. Here's the thing: a couple of things have made their way on Twitter over the last couple of days. One showing a pitcher getting an entire inning, an entire half inning in the same time it took Pedro Baez to throw one pitch in the playoffs. I mean, it's literally side by side. And you're like, well, you can't go back to that Pedro Baez.
No, you can't go back to that.
You can't go back to that.
I was talking to legendary George. I'm sorry, Joe, I just want to throw this one quick thing out and then jump back on. I was talking to legendary old baseball writer George King. He covered the Yankees in the New York Post for forever. He called the other day and we were talking and because George always has the gambler's attitude, we were asking the question, okay, who's going to manipulate this first? Who is going to recognize, who's going to find the way to turn this into their advantage? Are they going to start quick pitching hitters? Like the pitchers are actually going to use this. Who's going to figure out a way to manipulate the rule to their favor? And how are they going to do it?
It's going to be fun to watch. I don't know. I was on a radio show the other day, and they were asking me, like, what are they going to do with the no shift? And I said, here's what I can tell you. There are people working on it right now. There are people. You can guarantee
top men.
Top men
are on this.
Men.
Top men are working on it as we speak. So, yeah, there are going to be adjustments, and I think that's going to be kind of cool and fun. I mean, the pitch clock is obviously going to change the dynamic with stolen bases, and so the question is, who's going to take advantage of that? How are they going to take advantage of that? I mean, I think that there are analytic teams all over baseball who are pretty fired up because this is like a whole new world for them to conquer.
I can get a raise if I can figure this one out.
That's exactly right.
And Joe, there's also one other rule, that we didn't talk about, and you can jump in on this too, which is that I believe you also have a limited number of throws to first.
That's right. Step-offs. Two step-offs per at-bat. And you can still throw over a third time, but you have to pick off the runner. If you don't pick off the runner, it's a balk, and the runner goes to second base or whatever base it is.
You have to try to. You don't have to be successful.
You can try to. You have to be successful on the third try.
Oh, wow.
So basically, you get two step-offs, and then, but the reason they have that is obviously if you had 2 step-offs and you weren't allowed to throw the third time, the guy would take
everyone would steal.
Right, everybody steal. Their lead would be basically all the way to second. So you can't take too huge a lead because they can still pick you off. But if they make it back safely, it's a balk. And so I don't think that's going to have as much. I really don't think that's going to have as much of an impact on the game.
Look at Howard Soul leave his body right on camera.
Because Howard is like us baseball nuts. We're already imagining the worst case scenarios of that happening.
Why am I being told what to do?
No, but really, you're going to miss throws to first base. I mean, this is where I get crazy. It's like people are like, who's going to miss 4-man outfields? Who's going to miss
rights, Joe Posnanski?
I'm not into states' rights. I'm not into states' rights on any level.
Actually, let's actually be honest. I'm not into states' rights either. States' rights has done my people harm.
yes. But I'm into a centralized government in baseball. I think baseball's been sitting around.
Federalist. This is the Federalist Papers.
I'm a federalist when it comes to baseball because baseball's been allowing. They're like, oh, the players will figure it out. The teams will figure it out. No, they won't. You've got to create the game that is going to be most interesting for the fans. And I think these rules, we'll see. I'm not saying they're definitely going to work. We might be having this exact conversation in 3 months and I'll be like, this is a disaster, but I don't think so. I think this is really exciting.
So let me ask this question because Howard, you are imagining all the worst case scenarios, the sum of all fears. Game 7 of the World Series, and
are you really gonna end the game? Are you gonna end Game 7 because some dude was working on his wristbands and the season's over?
Well, let me ask you this. I'll be just come right back at that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you really going to end a Super Bowl because the play clock ran out and it was 4th and 4 and now it's 4th and 9?
Stupid sport.
Well, it might be a stupid sport, but I'm just saying it's the rule. It's not the rule. Let the players live up to the rules. I'm sorry.
So let me ask this question realistically, though, absent that kind of ridiculous scenario that happens once in a millennia.
That will happen this October.
Book it, right? What are the unintended consequences, right? Because every time there are these rules, you said, kind of, hey, keep saying the players and the teams are going to figure it out. And he said, but they don't. No, the reality is they do figure it out, but they figure it out in a way that's not entertaining for any of us, but is going to zero in and hit that pleasure button over and over again to get what they want out of this. So what do you guys think the unintended consequences of some of these rule changes would be?
Well, there are a couple of fairly obvious ones. I do think, that most of the time, this, we never see the unintended consequences coming, right? I mean, that's suddenly we look around and go, oh, wow, I did not expect that to have had that kind of effect. Look, I think some of the things are exactly what are Howard's worst case scenarios, right? That a game ends on a balk because the guy threw over to first base 3 times or an unintentional walk or, a ball, the automatic ball or an automatic strike end up playing this huge role in the games and whatever. I'm not as concerned about that. I'm really not. I think these are the best athletes in the world. They'll figure it out. Once they know what the rules are, once they know what they're, I'm a big tennis guy too, as Howard knows. And it's super frustrating to see, your favorite player get called for time in a crucial game after a really long rally, and he's go to get the towel and
time violation, Mr. Posnanski.
Yeah, exactly. This as a rank of time violation. And then it's really frustrating. But they know the rules, they know the deal, and you would hope that people will be smart and intelligent about how they call these things. So I think that's one of the unintended consequences. I got to be honest. I don't really even know what the consequences are going to be with the shift. I just don't know yet what that's going to be.
How do they exploit it, right? Because you think about, for instance, in basketball, the concept of, hey, if you foul over a certain number of times as a team, then those guys are going to the free throw line every single time. So then they said, oh, okay, well, then in that case, let me just foul the worst free throw shooter all the time.
Right.
And then he has to go and brick 2, and then we get the ball back. And so that was kind of the unintended consequence of that, and they had to address that. And now people are trying to exploit that where, whereby you are trying to run into the guy, so it's not an intentional foul. So I'm trying to think. Okay, so for instance, let's take the shift. The shift is, in theory, supposed to encourage more fielded play of base hits from the left-handers, right? How are these people going to sit back, the strategists, the analytics guys, and just the straight up baseball IQ guys, and figure out, oh, because of this, now we can do this over and over and over again, because that's the kind of the loophole in the system.
Yeah, I think certainly, even within the context of the shift, there are ways to manipulate the defense, right? I mean, it's like the shift is not, you can still stand basically as close as you want to second base. You can stuff them up the middle. The real issue is you can't drop them back anymore. They have to stay on the dirt. So there'll be no four-man outfields. But, I think that these guys still have the incredible data. They'll still figure out ways to do that. The thing that is really interesting to me is a lot of pitchers did not like the shift. And what's really interesting about that is pitchers felt like when somebody beat the shift, they felt cheated.
They felt cheated. 100%.
They felt cheated, right? Even though the shift might have gotten them extra outs, they don't care. Mm-hmm. They feel like if somebody dribbles a ball to the left side and beats out a single, they're like, I won that battle. I should not, right. And conversely, even though they would rarely admit it, if they gave up a line drive right into the shift, they did not feel like they did their job right or well.
They gave up a hit. They gave up a rope.
Yeah, I gave up a rope. And yeah, so what? So some analytics guy figured out how to turn that into an out, but I didn't do my job. That's right. I think that's going to be very interesting to see what effect it's going to have on pitchers. Yeah. And are pitchers going to be able to start having more control over where they put the defense? Is this still going to all come from upstairs? I mean, I think there are a lot of very interesting issues, but these guys are way smarter than me. They're going to figure out stuff that I just flat out can't imagine yet.
Well, one of the things that I actually like about this, and I know that I come off as the traditionalist and the naysayer and the whole thing, but let us be clear about two specific things, right? Number one, where do I think there are going to be the unintended consequences? Well, obviously the first one is injury. If guys feel like they're getting rushed and they had to come to the plate because they weren't quite ready or they were thrown. Now, obviously, you'll adjust to that and you'll get ready. But in pressure situations, sure, when you do need to slow it down and you are playing on the road and you're playing in Yankee Stadium and you know what I mean? I mean, there is a reason why you slow the momentum down. It's called a timeout in other sports, where in baseball, you really can't do that. And now you're sort of being pressured into doing some things in ways that you're not used to doing them in really, as they say today, high leverage situations. And so that is one of the things that I do worry about. But the other thing that I do like, I remember being on the phone with Joe Madden after the Angels fired him. And it was ironic to be on the phone with Joe because he's one of the Frankensteins. It's like, you did
exactly
this,
right.
It's exactly right. But I remember watching a game routinely last year. 1 out, runner on first, shift. I'm like, do we not play for double plays anymore? If I'm a pitcher, I'm pissed.
Yeah.
There's a ground ball that's got me out of the inning, and you've got the analytics guy. My second baseman is out in short field. You just cost me the inning. So I think that one of the things that I really do like about this is that it's going to bring some more control back to the pitcher. Yeah. And you may start to see a little bit more baseball the way we're used to seeing baseball, where we're here for outs. And for the ground ball pitchers out there that are here for the outs, maybe it'll extend games for them as well. Or maybe none of them can pitch and we're still going to do this assembly line stuff where, the goal is to get 27 outs and not to see good pitchers pitch longer into games. Right. I don't know. But the one thing I do like about getting rid of the shift is that you are going to see more traditional alignments. You are going to play for more double plays. And I'm hoping, it is my sincere hope, that what these rules do is that kills once and for all the extended launch angle. the extended emphasis on launch angle, that you can actually string hits together. Like, and I don't know if this is actually going to be the case, because when guys are throwing 98, 99,
Right.
100 miles an hour consistently, you can't string rallies together in baseball.
No.
It's really, really hard to get multiple hits off of a guy throwing 100 miles an hour. And so, maybe this stuff is going to create the idea that you can actually start some rallies.
All you want, in my view, is for it to tilt the game in the right direction. It's not going to fix it. It's not going to.
No, and Joe, my feeling, I was going to say one quick thing. My feeling, my big fear on all this, and when you talk about unintended consequences, the biggest fear that I have in all of this is that we end up like football, and we end up talking about the rules more than the game. When the rules become the game, that's when it's going to suck. Yeah. And that is like, what are we talking about the Super Bowl? Oh, there's a holding call with a minute left. All we're doing is talking about rules. And we don't do that in baseball.
Right.
Like, what do we always say? The reason why baseball is better than football is when the ball goes over the fence, nobody's looking back for flags.
Right.
Run is the run. Right. And in football, all we do is talk about rules. Oh, you can call holding on every play, and you could do this, and it's all stupid rules. And that is the biggest reason why I dislike football. Not one of the biggest reasons why I dislike football is that it's a completely rules-based sport, and baseball was never like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, and I think if it does take us a little bit down that road, that's a bad thing. I don't think it should. I think these rules are clear enough. They're going to get used to them. I really don't think, look, you and I both know it's been on the record, on the rule book for decades that pitchers are supposed to throw the ball 20 seconds after they get it. That's been a rule.
All you got to do is play to the rules.
That's right. That's not new. That has been a rule forever. And the umpires wouldn't call it. They didn't feel empowered to call it. They wouldn't call it. So this is really just it's continuation of what was already a rule, and I think it's simple. It's not holding or pass interference or anything like the NFL where it's really a judgment call. It's pretty straightforward. Same thing with the shift. I mean, 2 feet on the infield is really the main thing. I'm hoping that what the shift does is create a little more athleticism at second base, and so we start seeing guys make plays like they used to. But we'll see. I don't know what that's going to do for sure. The bigger bases, I don't think will have an impact either way on any of that stuff. So I don't think these rules would take us down that road. But if it does, we got to keep an eye on it. We don't want people. Exactly. Although I will say this, a whole lot of baseball talk is about balls called strikes, strikes called balls, and instant replay on.
Well, the very next thing that we know where the sport is going is the robot arms. What I was going to say is, before you came on, Joe, we were talking about, we were talking about the different rules and sort of where that over the last several years, we have seen essentially a revolution in baseball. Right. We have seen the game really take, and then this is under Rob Manfred, that we are going to we're not going to talk about it anymore. We're going to be about it. So over the last 5 years or so, or even a little bit more, now we've got, we said a farewell to the 4-pitch walk. Now it's just automatic. That's out the door. And suddenly we've got the ghost runner on second base. That's, that's something that is now, we had the 7-inning doubleheader, and that was there. Now we've got the 2 playoff teams, the 2 extra playoff teams. Right. Then we had the 1 game postseason, and so the point was before you came. The point was before you came on that this is, if it looks jarring and it feels jarring for baseball, it is jarring because we have actually seen a lot of changes. Yeah. So in the spirit of that, I mean, we're also going to ask Joe, what do you feel? What else is coming? I remember when I was covering in the 2000s, there had been talk about, obviously we know that there's expansion. We know that we're going to get, that baseball has got to solve they've got to solve the Tampa Bay Oakland issue. Sure. Once that is solved, they're going to expand. They're going to Las Vegas. They're going to go to Nashville. They're going somewhere. Austin, Texas was on the plan. There had been talk in the 2000s under Bob DuPay and Bud Selig that they were going to do a San Antonio, Monterey mixed team down there to go international. And then the security issues and the economy collapsing ended that idea. There was talk about radical realignment, getting rid of the American and the National League and do it regionally, that there was going to be regional realignment, that the Red Sox and the Angels and the Yankees and the A's don't play each other anymore. The Dodgers and the Mets don't play each other anymore unless they meet in the World Series, and that you're going to have that. So, Joe, what else in this revolution of baseball rules and alterations do you think we can expect?
Well, you've already mentioned ball strikes. I mean, right? The automatic.
VAR.
Robot umps are next.
Or something along those lines. Maybe it's a challenge system. I don't know what it's going to be yet.
You cannot challenge balls and strikes.
Yeah, there's something
We'll be
coming
here all
down
day.
the road.
We'll be here. We'll be back.
Well,
we'll be back to
but it is interesting. I mean, I don't even know that I even like it, but I did see the challenge system at play. You get 3 challenges during a game, which is, it's kind of interesting in the sense of that basically you would only challenge pitches that matter. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's where they're going, but something's happening. Something's going to happen along those lines. But what interests me is the big problem in baseball, the biggest problem in baseball, is that the pitchers have gotten too dominant and there are too many of them. And there are too many of them throwing 100 miles an hour. And it has taken away the game. It has taken action out of the game. It has taken offense out of the game. But it's also, like you say, it's taken characters out of the game. Basically, we no longer really even care who's starting a game anymore, unless it's
assembly line pitching.
It's assembly line pitching. So,
which also means, Joe, because you've got a new book coming out as well.
Yes,
there's the ripple effect of talk about unintended consequences. As we talk to our good friend Dave Stewart about this all the time.
Yeah.
What's a Hall of Fame pitcher?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Look, I've got my book coming out, Why We Love Baseball, is a countdown of the greatest moments of baseball history. How many of those are, perfect games and perfect and great pitching performances and guys going 16 innings,
I told you my moment, my epiphany. I think we did this with Mike Shore on your pod. I had my moment. It was in the 2020 World Series where I had the moment hit me where it was like, oh, you're taking Blake Snell out of a championship game right now.
Yep.
And I just had a moment that I never thought I had to articulate. I'm not here for wins and losses. I'm here for competition.
Yeah.
I'm here to see if you can beat me. And you're taking this away.
I got just a stream of angry text from Brian Koppelman, the guy.
Our man, Brian.
Yeah, our guy, Brian. He's not even that big a baseball fan, but he's like,
he is now.
He used to be. And then when he saw Blake Snell get pulled, he's like, I'm done with this game. I'm done. All I want is a moment. I'm not here. Yeah, that's right. I'm here for what greatness can happen in the game, and they're not even giving him a chance to be
I'm here
to
for
be great.
Well, remember they did it with what was it? Which year was it? Was it the 2017 or was it the 2018 World Series where the Dodgers were like telling Rich Hill, doesn't make a difference what you do. You're coming out of the game.
You're coming out of the game.
Well, and you could have a no-hitter. You're coming out of the game.
Well, I mean, when they pulled Kershaw in the middle of his perfect game up, and it's frustrating. So one of the things that I think is coming down the pipe, and it won't have a real impact on like it's not a rule, but is reducing the number of pitchers that teams are allowed to carry. I think that is coming down the pipe. The last year they made the announcement that teams are no longer allowed to carry more than 13 pitchers.
No more than 13, which
is crazy because 13 used to be. I mean, they used to carry 9. I mean, that was what they used to carry, and now they're carrying 13, and they want more. So what I think is going to happen is 13 gets reduced to 12, 12 gets reduced to 11. I don't know how low they can go, but they could probably get it down to 11, and that does change the dynamic some.
There's the unintended consequence then the utility player who can also pitch.
Maybe.
Well, maybe. I hate that because that was the one thing I was just about to say, Joe. I said the thing that I really dislike about this as well is it used to be a novelty.
Right. Oh,
it used to be a novelty that there was a position player pitching, and now it's completely routine. Right. And it's routine simply because you just burn through pitchers because you don't care anymore.
Exactly.
You totally changed the whole dynamic of the sport.
Yeah.
Okay, it's an 18-2 game. So, hey, look, the second baseman's pitching. Position players pitch all the time now.
You would hope the whole point of it is to stretch pitchers out. Pitchers have to go longer because you don't have as many of them. But yeah, there could definitely be some other unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences of that might be you make a decision in the fifth inning whether or not you feel like you can win that game or not. And if you can't, then you just blow an arm, whatever. But
innings eaters, they used to have them.
But here's my question. I mean, to both of you, just from your understanding of athletes in general, can pitchers really not throw 9 innings anymore? I mean, are we really at a point where we have evolved to the point where they're so max effort, they throw so hard that you legitimately could not ask a pitcher to throw 9 innings anymore, or you legitimately could not expect a pitcher to get outs for 9 innings?
It's also the cumulative, right? That's what it's about. It's not necessarily about those 9 innings right then and there. It's the idea that like adding to it's
its own load management,
right?
Yep. Exactly.
Well, I think it's that, but I also think it's something else. And I think it's something else. And Joe, you were there and I was there. We witnessed it. It's Joe Torre, one of my all-time favorites.
Yep.
Joe, it's your fault. It was Red Sox Yankees, 1998 to 2002. We got to foul off pitches to get Pedro Martinez out of the game.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden, the pitch counts just kept skyrocketing and skyrocketing because the goal was to make contact. The goal wasn't to just run up pitch counts.
Yeah.
And if the goal is now to run up pitch counts, guys are not going to get to 9 innings. You can't get to 9 innings if you've got, that many pitches. And so this was a strategy. This was not, oh, good, look at the game, evolving. This was Pedro Martinez is the best pitcher in the game, and we can't beat him. We can't beat the Red Sox if he's still in the game. So what we need to do is we need to get him out of the game. So the Yankees just ground down at bats. They just grind out at bats. And then everybody starts grinding out at bats. And before you know it, your starting pitchers got 87 pitches in the 5th inning.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And there you go. This was a strategy.
Great drama.
Yeah.
Great, exactly. So now, and now it's done. And so the question is that do I think that can change? No, I don't think you can go back because grinding out pitchers is a strategy. Grinding out at bats. Not only is grinding out at bats a strategy, grinding out at bats gets you paid. If you're not even a great hitter, it'll get you paid. I am also hoping, and I don't know how this is going to work, and maybe the shift will have something to do with it. Maybe we're relying too much on rules instead of culture. But I also think that baseball really, you have got to increase a certain type of action. 179 strikeouts, 225 strikeouts is just unacceptable to watch a game. To tell me that, and you and I talked about this over text the other day, although nobody really responded. Actually, you did respond to me when you were talking in your column last week about batting averages and about how batting averages really don't mean anything. They mean a lot.
Sure, of course they do.
Because the game is to make contact. All of this is about action, and action begins with contact. So if you're going to say to me, it's okay. And I think that you were talking about, who was the player you brought up as your example? Was Darryl Strawberry, the Darryl Strawberry, Don Mattingly comp. And I, the comp is, as a 260 hitter, as valuable as a 300 hitter, depending on their production. To me, one of the issues with the sport right now, Kyle Schwarber hitting 190.
Right.
You had Gary Sanchez hitting 130. How are you going to get me to watch a game when guys are hitting 130? The game is a game of failure already. 3 out of 10 is excellent. So I'm watching 70% failure. Now you want me to watch 90% failure?
Yeah, you're right. Right. Yeah, it's 100% true. And the point being, batting average doesn't matter when it comes to what the analytics team looks at how you help a team win. But it matters tremendously to what the game looks like. Of course it does. And it's a huge part. And I'm glad baseball's beginning to care about that. Because I think that matters. But going back to the pitcher for a second, you bring up Dave Stewart, Smoke, we used to call him Smoke Stewart, right? He didn't strike out 300 guys in a year.
No, he didn't.
He pitched to contact. He absolutely pitched to contact. And so did even the big strikeout guys like Seaver. Ryan didn't. Nolan Ryan was sort of his own thing. But Seaver and Carlton and those guys who were big strikeouts guys still pitched to contact. And they didn't max out on every pitch. And they would throw, really Justin Verlander in a lot of ways was sort of from them. He grew from them, where he would throw 91 in the first inning and throw 99 in the eighth, when he needed it. And I don't know why we can't go back to that. I mean, have hitters gotten so good that you can't get them out throwing 85% for the first 3, 4, 5 innings? I don't know.
No, I remember asking Joe Torre this a long time ago. I said, Joe, Warren Spahn, you caught Warren Spahn.
Yeah.
Warren Spahn won 363 games. How did he do that? and he said a lot of curveballs in the middle innings.
Yeah.
He threw a lot of breaking balls in the middle innings. He had to conserve, he's like this. He had to learn. He goes, you know what we used to call it back then? I was like, what? He goes, pitching.
Yeah.
You had to know how to pitch. Right. And so as we go, this is, Joe, thank you for swooping in.
Absolutely.
We're loving this. Tell us about your piece in Esquire.
Yeah, it's in Esquire. It's in the magazine, but it's also at esquire.com. It is a full-fledged breakdown of all the new rules and what the consequences could be, and maybe a little bit of what's coming down the pike. So it's
the book.
And the book is coming out in September, but we just revealed the cover yesterday.
The cover, red cover.
Red cover, very nice, with a little glove on there called Why We Love Baseball. Available for pre-order all over the place. You can go to my website at joeposnanski.com. I've got a couple of special deals going that I'm involved with a couple of bookstores. And it's a countdown of the greatest moments in baseball history. I'm excited about it.
Amin, final thought.
Well, I had one question for the two of you guys, because I've heard this theory posited somewhere else. That the idea that baseball is in trouble because its audience skews older. Is there any possibility that because baseball is a sport that appeals to older people, not older people of a certain generation? I mean, once you hit 45, you really start to appreciate a slow game that allows you to take your time and ease in. Is there any possibility that it is just a sport geared for people who have reached a certain level of maturity?
Well, I'll tell you my theory. I'd be interested to hear what Howard thinks. I think it is geared toward older people, but I think it's geared toward older people who loved the game when they were kids. I think it's losing the kids is the big issue, because yes, I think there's a long history of people who were huge baseball fans when they were a kid, kind of lost touch with it for a couple of decades, and then as they got a little bit older, into their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, they came back to the game. But you have to have that first base. You just have to have that first initial sort of love of the game to sort of come back to it. And I think that's the fear, is that kids, like really young kids, are not into baseball at all. And that's, I know. And
mine, but are you?
My daughters, they're not huge sports fans, but they both like baseball a little bit. And they like baseball more than any of their friends. None of their friends, they would go to games. They would go to a game with one of their friends, and they'd have to explain the rules, and that didn't matter who they were. So that's the issue to me.
Yeah.
The issue is not that. I think, as you get older, the game fits your pace a lot better. It's a great game to go out and watch. But you have to get them young, and that's been a big problem, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a piece of baseball that has to go away, and that has gone away, and it's never coming back, sadly. And I think that piece of it is that there was a time when baseball was the only game in town. For our generation, it was the biggest game in town. It was the only game in town in summertime. Now it's not. Now you've got NFL training camps, which take on, they're not even, the games don't even count, and they lead Sports Center, right? You've got NBA free agency, which is a business transaction, and it leads over a live game. I remember listening to, Larry Baer and Walt Jocketty used to complain about this, about, they used to time, when baseball got its first, mention on Sports Center, and it would be 9, 10, 11 minutes into the show. They didn't even mention the damn sport. It's the only live game taking place right now. So so those are the types of things that have eroded, baseball. It doesn't own the field anymore. It doesn't own the summer all by itself anymore. And what I think the biggest thing, though, to your point, which is where baseball has its salvation, is that it is a family game more than any other sport. It's a father-daughter game. It's a mother-son game. It's a father-son game. It is that type of game where You remember baseball because you remember your family. And so when you're a little kid, you grow up, you get it sounds really, schmaltzy, but it's really true, is that, in the summertime, you remember, your father painting the side of the house with the game on the radio. And so the game, because there's so many games, because the game is played every single day. And so that connection to the people in your life is the reason why older people love baseball, because you start losing those older people, and that's the connection. That's what you remember from them. And so that's very, very different than playing every Sunday. In fact, I remember the only thing that really starts to come close is watching a football game with your family on Sundays. Mm-hmm. People don't really talk about watching NBA games all week with their family. It's just a different type of thing. But in baseball, summertime, nothing to do. There's a game on every day. There's a game on the radio, whatever. There is a rhythm to that sport that carries you throughout the rest of your life. And that is the thing. That's the reason why we're all traditionalists. It's the thing that connects you. And so that's the piece of it that I think is the reason why 50-year-olds watch it. But to your point about these rule changes, where baseball was in deep trouble is that even the 50-year-olds now are like, I'm going to bed. This game is taking too long. East Coast games, it's 9:45. We're in the 7th inning. Yeah. We're in this. Well, that's actually good. We're in the 5th inning, and so I think that's the I think that's the piece where you got to bring it back. But clearly, Joe's right that you play this game, you learn the game with your family, you learn the game, and as that relationship continues, so does your relationship with baseball. That is it for us. Thank you so much, Joe, for pinch hitting for us. Of course. This is great. It's always good to see you. We will do Meadowlarkers 70 next week. If you are wondering why we did not have honorary captains this week, it is because Meadowlarkers 69 stands by itself. It's a number that stands alone. No disrespect to the sack master Jared Allen of the Minnesota Vikings, but let's face it, it's a number that has no competition. We'll see you next week.